You're listening to Sensitive Changemakers. This podcast is created for highly sensitive leaders and is designed to support you to embrace your strengths and gifts so you can feel more confident in your own mind and body and live a life with intention, purpose, and more importantly, joy. I'm your host, Kate Carter, a fellow HSP who has a BA Honours degree in education, is a fully trained and qualified professional coach and NLP practitioner, and has over 17 years of teaching and over 3 years of coaching experience supporting highly sensitive people. I believe that you can do anything you want to in this life, but that sometimes the path forward becomes muddy with self-doubt and fear of failure. It's my mission to help sensitive thought leaders peel away the self-doubt and stories holding them back, for them to see their own beauty and strength so they can increase self-confidence and self-trust through thought and embodiment work and see their path clearly and move forward confidently, living their life with intention and purpose. I would love for you to come and join us. Hello, happy Monday. I hope you are all well. So I am just going to make sure that we are live in the group, and then we're going to make a start. So this is day 1 of Release Anxiety. This is something I'm really passionate, just incredibly passionate about, because this is something that has affected me for so many years, and it's something I spend a lot of time training in, learning about, and supporting clients in. And so I really wanted to bring this conversation into this space, and we're going to be doing this a little bit differently. So not only are there going to be this, so it's going to be the live in the Facebook group, we have also got the audio version if you want to listen to that, and I'm going to put this on the podcast as well. So there's loads of ways to listen to this. And if you haven't signed up for this and you would like the PDFs that go with this, there's a workbook that go with each day. If you would like that, then please, I'll put the link in somewhere and you can just sign up. If you're listening on podcast, it'll be in the show notes, and you can sign up there, and then you can get access to the free PDF books as well that go alongside this. So welcome, let's make a start. So today, the reason I've kind of broken this down into 3 days is because I feel that when we're dealing with anxiety, we have a tendency to focus on our thoughts, which is a huge part of it, and one of the pieces of the puzzle that really supported me when I was releasing my anxiety. And you will notice I talk about releasing anxiety, not managing it, not navigating it, not putting up with it, but actually releasing it, because I think that terminology is so much more kinder and nicer to ourselves than managing or battling or navigating through. And yes, we are navigating, we are exploring and things like that, but to actually talk about managing and battling through something, the words there I think are really important to kind of just highlight. If we're using that terminology, we're going to feel that we have to be really harsh on ourselves and that we are stupid and that we can't find our way, etc. And I don't want that to be the case here. I want us to actually be really kind to ourselves. I want us to show ourselves some self-compassion, because I know that that is a huge part of this. So I've split this up into 3 days. So we've got the thought processes, which as I said, is such an important piece, and we'll be looking at the thought processes tomorrow. These are thought patterns. These are different ways that we can look at the language that we're using to talk to ourselves more so than anything else, but also the language that we're just verbalizing to other people as well. So that's going to be tomorrow. That is a big part of the puzzle. But what often gets overlooked is the importance of the body and the emotions when we are looking at anxiety. So first of all, I want to really just go over what is anxiety, and then I'm going to split it up into looking at emotions and the body today. I really want you to leave this series with some clear ideas and some clear tools, and hopefully a better understanding of what's happening for you. Okay, so first of all, anxiety. Anxiety is a complex emotional state characterised by feelings of worry, nervousness or fear that are strong enough to interfere with one's daily activities. Now, I'm going to caveat that by saying that a lot of us, in fact, every single person in the world that I ever know of, has had anxiety. It is a complete normal human response, okay? It is a normal feeling. However, the bit that I'm highlighting there is when it's strong enough to interfere with one's daily activities. That becomes heightened anxiety, and that really can rule our life if we allow it to be, talking from personal experience there. So it can manifest through a combination of psychological, physical and behavioural symptoms, and some key points that define anxiety here. So if you thought, I don't know how far I am on the scale of anxiety, these are just some of them. So emotional symptoms: persistent worry or fear about everyday situations, feeling tense, nervous or restless, anticipating the worst outcomes even without evidence. So that's emotional. Physical symptoms, and this is why the body and emotions are so important. Physical symptoms, things like increased heart rate or palpitations, sweating or trembling, shortness of breath or rapid breathing, stomach problems. So you might have stomachache, nausea, things like that, fatigue and difficulty sleeping. So those are very real feelings. A lot of the time when I was growing up, it was all about the mind. So it's all in your mind, Kate. Yes, it is very much there, but it is also in the body as well. It's a very real experience. You've got cognitive symptoms as well, so difficulty concentrating or thinking clearly, if you have racing thoughts, irrational fears or a sense of impending doom. You've got behavioural symptoms, so avoidance of situations or activities that trigger anxiety, and this sometimes is not on a conscious level, it might be on a subconscious level, that you are avoiding something when you're not even aware of why you're avoiding that particular situation or that person or that event. And it normally is because your body and brain know that before that would have triggered anxiety, let's just, that was painful, and your body is always working towards avoiding pain. So how can I avoid pain? And then types of anxiety. So you've got lots and lots of different anxiety. For today, we're going to be talking about generalized anxiety, but you've got things like panic disorder, which is what I had. These are sudden intense fear that normally lead to panic attacks. You've got social anxiety, you've got specific phobias, phobias are huge. You've got OCD and you've got PTSD. So as for today, as I said, we're just going to be focusing on that generalized anxiety. And anxiety can vary, and I think this is what we have to be aware of. It's different for every person. It can vary in intensity, duration and impact. It can be, as we said before, a normal response to stress, but becomes something more when it is excessive and it hinders daily functioning. So that's kind of hopefully the terminology that you understand, that you can relate to. And there are some, I really want to kind of go into what's happening to your body and brain when you are actually experiencing anxiety. Because one of the things that I know is that the understanding behind it really can help to kind of alleviate some of that self-blame that we can often find ourselves doing. So when you experience anxiety, various changes and interactions occur in the brain involving multiple regions. So in the amygdala, so your amygdala is a small kind of almond-shaped region in the brain that plays a crucial part in processing emotions, including fear and anxiety. So it very much gets switched on. So when you perceive a threat or you feel anxious, and remember this back in the day would have been a life and death situation, but as we're evolving as humans, some of these threats and fears are all in our, not all in our head. I don't want to make it kind of trivialize it, but it could start in the head. It could be a very real fear that we're worrying about, but it doesn't necessarily have to be life and death. So the amygdala, when you perceive something that is a threat, that feels really anxious, this becomes activated and sends distress signals to other parts of the brain and initiates that fight, flight or freeze response that we all hopefully understand. If we don't, it basically is the transmitters from your brain telling the rest of your body to either fight something, flee from something or freeze from something. And generally speaking, you may have one preferred style. You might find that when you get really anxious for something, you just want to run away from something, or you find yourself freezing, or you want to just keep pushing through. Those are the different kind of styles that we often find with anxiety nowadays. You may have a particular one. Mine is definitely flight. Mine is just run away, get away, hide somewhere. You may have a different style. You've got the hippocampus as well. So this is responsible for memory formation and retrieval, and it interacts with the amygdala. So anxiety can affect the hippocampus by heightening the recall of fear-related memories. So if you have stored a memory that was really scary for you, when you perceive a threat and the amygdala gets activated and it starts working at the hippocampus, and that hippocampus starts to retrieve memories like, oh my God, we've been through something similar, this was really scary and we've been here before. And it starts to kind of work together in that way. Not necessarily in the most helpful way, although the original kind of intention there is to support you to get away from something or to fight something. But in this particular situation, again, as we've evolved and as some of our worries and anxieties are more thought-induced or more kind of to do with our day-to-day fears and worries, we often remember things that have scared us before, and that comes into play here as well, which then adds to our evidence. And I'll be talking more about evidence tomorrow, but it adds to our evidence. And I'm going to do this in inverted commas because our memory and our emotions and our brain generally isn't always logical and accurate. And so we may often remember things, but we tend to remember things through the lens of emotion. And so if we're scared of something, that memory becomes so much more scary than possibly it was at the time. And maybe somebody else who has experienced the same event didn't feel any anxiety or any worry or fear around that particular event. It's very much seen through our lens of how we see the world and our emotions that we were feeling at the time. And so if you take those things with a pinch of salt, they're not necessarily going to be wholly accurate. But when we are having an anxious response, as we're talking about here with the fight, flight or freeze, where you've got both of these kind of brain parts starting to work together, we don't really care about what is logical or what is accurate at that time. We just know that it feels very real. And as a result, we have this anxiety loop. And it is really important here to kind of understand that that's what's happening, and you are not broken. You don't need fixing because this is your response. This is just your normal body's way. And if you look at it, if you take a step back and think, well, this is just how my particular body and brain has evolved since I was X years old until present day, because of the experiences that I've had and the responses I've had to those experiences, and what my body and brain has kind of meant those things to mean. And that is all of our experiences and how we see things. It's our lens through life, if you like. And one of the ways that we can really use this is to see it as an opportunity to question it, as an opportunity to learn and to grow. So when we're having these, and when we understand that this is what our body and brain is doing, it's bringing these things to the forefront because it wants us to avoid pain and fear, we can actually start to counter evidence things, which is what we'll be looking at tomorrow. So our body and brain is bringing all this evidence to the forefront. This has been really scary before. You've had so much fear before. Please avoid this. It's too scary. And understanding that that is just a lens that we see through our experiences. It doesn't necessarily mean that is true. And then once we understand that, we can counter evidence it. So we can bring evidence in a more logical, accurate way of saying, well, actually, let's look at the counter argument for that. What is the evidence I have against that? And that actually can really help to balance your thoughts, which again, we'll look at tomorrow. So you've got the amygdala, the hippocampus. You've got the prefrontal cortex, which is the more evolved part of the brain. It's the one where it involves higher order thinking, decision making, and regulating emotional responses. This is a really interesting part because when you have anxiety, the prefrontal cortex kind of just switches off. It has reduced activity and effectiveness, and so it can't help to regulate the amygdala as well. And so the amygdala, if you like, I always think of the amygdala as like a really, really over-enthusiastic assistant. So the amygdala is really, really excited to help and wants to get on board with everything. And if left unchecked, just goes crazy and tries to get everything sorted and everything sort of brings everything to your attention, wants everything sorted. Whereas if it's got somebody there to kind of monitor it and say, right, that's not important right now, which is what the prefrontal cortex does. That's not important right now. We don't need to worry about that right now. You can see how that kind of calms it down. But when we're having an anxiety and response to something, the prefrontal cortex kind of goes to sleep for a little bit, and it's like the mentor for the overexcited assistant has just gone on a lunch break. So I hope that makes sense. You've also got your brain stimulating and releasing stress hormones through your adrenals. So you've got things like you've got cortisol, which can contribute to those really physical symptoms of anxiety, such increased heart rate and heightened alertness. Now again, the good side of this, and there is always a good side, there is a reason our bodies and brains do this, is because it wants us to get ready to fight, fly, like literally run away, or freeze to something, generally flying or fighting, one or the other. And it's getting us ready to do that. So it's giving our body, our heart, our lungs, the energy to be able to do that. And it's supposed to be in short bursts. So in very kind of real life threatened situations, you have that extra energy to do what needs to be done. And then once the threat passes, your body rebalances. The problem with the anxiety loop is because we don't really see a solution or an end to the threat that feels very, very real to us, it becomes a loop, and we can't, there are, you know, some people that don't actually ever come fully out of that anxiety loop, and so they never experience that balance. So this is when you have immune problems, where you might find that you're getting poorly all the time, or you've constantly got an upset stomach, because the energy isn't being distributed evenly, because it's constantly giving that energy and that push to your lungs, your heart and your extremities to get ready to fight or flee from something, instead of giving that energy to your immune system and to your digestive system and things like that. And so that can often be a really sneaky one, because once we're in that stage, we've normalized how anxiety feels. We've normalized that this is what happens to me. This is how I feel all the time. I've always got an upset stomach. I'm always getting cold. And we've normalized it without even realizing that actually our system is not regulating. It's not balancing. We are constantly in that anxiety loop. So I hope that makes sense. In another way, it's normally called living in the stress response, or just in survival mode. The amazing thing about our brains and our bodies, I think, is understanding that it can change. So neuroplasticity is a very, very real thing. This is the ability to be able to change your brain and the function of it. So yes, there's a downside to it, that prolonged anxiety, prolonged stress can have an effect on the way that our brain actually looks and functions. But the positive side of that is we can actually shift it back. We can help to counterbalance it. We can help to reduce some of those stresses, and actually support our brain in rebalancing. And the way that I always use this analogy, and I hope it helps here, is if you can imagine, so this is how my little brain works. You can imagine like little cells being attached by like almost like little links, okay? And each one of these little cells to one cell has got really, there are some where the links are so thick. They're so thick because they're used all the time. Think about it like a train line, if you like. There's a particular train line that's really used well, okay? In this case, the links between these two cells are used incredibly often, and so they're really, really well linked. Then you've got some other cells where you've got one cell going to another one, and it's like a little wavy line. It's not quite as thick because it doesn't get used as often. And this is what happens when they say that you can rewire your brain. What effect it means is, if you've got a really thick link between two cells, and again we're using that analogy here, that means that that has become automated. So for example, in real life, those two cells might mean something like going on the bus is really, really fear-inducing, and you don't even have to think about it. It's an instant reaction because it's so automated within your brain that it's just there, instantaneous. And you know that going on a bus is just a big no-no to you because it brings too much pain. Again, we are always about seeking pleasure and moving away from pain. So your body and brain will do everything it can to move away from those two things. Away from pain towards pleasure. And so when we're in this really kind of heightened anxiety, it makes sense, doesn't it, that these things become more and more automated. They become more and more of your identity. You start to identify as, I'm an anxious person on a bus. I can't go on a bus because of X, Y, and Z. And it becomes part of who you are. Well, that's just me. That's just me. Okay, does that make sense? Whereas some of the other cells, which don't have links, you might want to start creating new links. And this is where you start to bring in change in the brain. This comes in with some of the work we're going to do tomorrow and some of the work we're going to do tomorrow, today and tomorrow. Tomorrow about thought processes where we can actually shift and start to change the way we think about ourselves. So different cells start to link up and they start to have those stronger links and they become automated. And then some of the ones that used to be really strong, that are unhelpful for us, they start to become those weak, wiggly lines, if you like, and they're not as strong. So I'm hoping that kind of makes sense with neuroplasticity and how your brain is absolutely amazing. And yes, it can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. What I really want to focus on over the next 3 days is for you to understand that it is possible to shift and change who you see yourself as, and that then impacts on your thoughts, behaviours, emotions and actions. Okay. The important thing that we're going to work on today is emotions and body, because what I know to be true is anxiety presents itself very differently for every individual. So for some people, you will be very aware of your intrusive thoughts and you will be very aware of your thought processes. I know that I'm really worried about X, Y, and Z because I keep thinking about it all the time. You may also be one of these where you feel anxious. You may, and this was me, definitely for a long time, you may even have a panic attack or have a really huge anxiety response, but you don't know where it's come from. Like, I don't think I'm worrying about anything. I don't think there's anything on my mind. And that is a really interesting one. I find it just really, really fascinating because you feel it first and then you kind of have to work backwards to go, where's this coming from? And sometimes that is because you are so much in that cycle that everything has become so automated that you're not even aware of the original thoughts or the original events that caused that feeling in the first place. It's just become like that loop, that vicious loop for you. Okay, so that's kind of where we're going to start. So whether you are aware of your thoughts or you're just aware of the feelings that come up first, it's necessary for us to work with the whole body in order to relearn how to release anxiety, and it is absolutely possible. Okay, let me just move, take a bit of a breather, gonna have a bit of water before we start. As I'm going through this, if you do have any questions, please do let me know. Those people listening on the podcast, obviously this is Facebook Live as well, so you will hopefully understand as to why there are different people with questions that are coming up. And the other thing that I just want to highlight here in terms of being highly sensitive is I don't believe that every highly sensitive person has anxiety, but I do believe that there are strong links between the two in their, you know, highly sensitive people, deep thinkers, overthink things, go into the whys, which can be some of the traits of somebody who feels anxious as well. So really just kind of supporting you if you're highly sensitive on this and if you're anxious, because I think it's a double whammy. And what we're going to be talking about today with our body and our emotions, I think is extra important for highly sensitive people. So it's really important to realise that most of us have been taught to ignore or suppress our emotions. And our emotions are messages from the body. The body doesn't have a language. It's, you know, it works really well with the brain. They work very, very well. But your body is constantly telling you messages, but it doesn't have a language to use, and so it uses emotions. They are just messages from your body to your brain, telling the brain, hey, something's a little bit off here. But over time in society, we've been told to suppress them. So, you know, you may have been told in your past, don't cry, or don't get angry, don't show you're not allowed to stomp your feet and things like that. And it's become kind of ingrained that it's not okay to feel things, that we have to suppress or deny them or push them down. And it's so important here to remember that, yes, your hippocampus, if you remember, which is part of your brain that helps to remember things, yes, that's when it remembers things here. In the actual brain part, this is where we remember events, what was happening. And yes, it has an overlink with kind of emotions, because you will remember the emotion you were feeling as well. But your body also remembers things. But again, like I said, it doesn't have a language. And so it remembers things in different ways. It holds tension in different places that were activated during those really anxious times. And it does hold that unless we process it. And for so many people who have anxiety, this is, I think, the most difficult part, because it just feels so foreign for a lot of us. We're so used to working with our thoughts, and that's become normalized. But to work with the body, it feels weird, because your body can't say to you, Kate, yes, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's happening right now. We have to open up that communication to our body, and we do that through listening to our emotions, to being able to sit with our emotions. Okay. In nature, when I was doing my trauma training, in nature we watched a video, and it was of a gazelle-like animal that had been caught by a lion, and for whatever reason the lion leaves. I'm not quite sure why. You don't really get the full view of why the lion left, but at that time the gazelle was completely and utterly just plain dead. It had frozen. Once the lion has left, you can actually watch this animal go through its own body processing. And so it starts, so it's completely frozen, starts off with when the lion leaves. It's like plain dead. And then she starts to shake all over, like literally shaking from head to hoofs, just shaking all over. And it's her natural body's response to deregulating stress. And this is the bit that we don't know how to do. We're not taught how to do. We've kind of pushed down our natural response to it. But as soon as the animal has gone through that, the shaking, she just runs off, as though everything's back and balanced. And the problem, like I said, is it's not socially acceptable for a lot of us to show our emotions. We're taught from a young age, don't cry, don't get angry. It's seen as a weakness. But if we don't learn how to sit with and express these emotions, they will get stuck in the body. And this is one of the things that leads to chronic stress and illness, etc. So these are the bits that I really want to go through, and I'm going to break some of them down a little bit further. So the first one is seeing emotions as messages from your body, like just an understanding that your body doesn't have words, but it has emotions. Listening to them, allowing them to be, enables us to understand ourselves better and process them. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to give them power, that we have to go stomping around and kind of just talking about me, this is what I'm experiencing. We can do it in a really nice, I'm going to talk about nice, I was going to say calm, but some of them aren't very calm, in a nice way that feels good to you. The first part is always observing and awareness. Always, whenever you're working with anything you want to change, you can't change something you don't know. So we work with the observation skills first. So observing your emotions and starting to name them rather than suppressing them. So when you're feeling angry, actually just saying, I'm feeling really angry right now. Now, this is where I think parenting can be such a huge life lesson if you have kids, because this is one of them where I've had to work really hard as a parent, just as a human being, to express my emotions in a way that shows my children that it's okay, and mummy is processing them as well, if that makes sense. So I will say to my kids sometimes, and I don't get it right all the time, nowhere near perfect, but I will say where I can and where I'm able, I'm feeling really angry right now. It's got nothing to do with you. It's my response. I'm just going through this myself. And with my daughter, especially because she struggles a lot with her anger at the moment. She's only young and she doesn't really know the reason why. And again, this is where we don't need to know the why. When we're working with the body and the emotions, we don't need to know the why. Okay? Brain, yes. And I know our highly sensitive people in here will be digging deep into why. But our body and emotions, we don't need to know why. So with my daughter, she will say to me, I'm just so angry right now. And I don't know why. And I'm like, that's okay. What do you need to do? And we've come up with some that are not vicious or lashing out at other people, but still ways for her to express that. Okay, first of all, like we said, just understanding and naming the emotions can be incredibly powerful, because for some of us, we're not used to doing that at all. So I'm feeling really scared right now. I'm feeling really anxious right now. I'm feeling really angry right now, because anger can often be part of anxiety, before the anxiety loop or after. And so just naming those emotions can be really, really supportive. And I would bring into this, just notice the language that you're using. Again, at this point, we're just noticing and observing. Are you saying I am really anxious right now, or are you saying I'm feeling really anxious? I would always, if you're able to shift your language into I'm feeling really anxious right now, rather than I am anxious. And we'll go over the reasons for that in day 2 and day 3. But it's all about distancing your feelings from your identity a little bit here. So we are saying we're feeling anxious, we're feeling scared, rather than I am scared, I am anxious, because that is quite ingrained into the identity. And we'll go over why that's important day 2 and day 3. So, as I said, first step is seeing emotions as messages from your body, understanding that you do not need to know the why when you're working with your body and your brain. Second one is observing your emotions, naming them, and just getting used to saying, I am feeling, however you are feeling. And you can say it out loud, you can write it down, you can say it in your head. It doesn't need to be anything that is uncomfortable for you at this point, but just getting used to observing them. The third one is sitting with your emotions and trying not to push them away or deny them. And this sounds really counterintuitive, but the better we get at sitting with our emotions, sitting with those bodily feelings, the better we are at being resilient and actually letting those feelings and emotions pass quicker, because it becomes okay. And when something becomes okay, it doesn't get stuck. So if we're saying to ourselves, it's really, I'm feeling really anxious right now, I'm feeling really scared. Okay, let me just kind of sit with that a little bit. How does that feel? Then we are allowing ourselves to process that. And I'll give you some ways that you can do that in a really kind of safe space. But you're giving yourself time to process that. When we are sitting with this, there's an analogy I always use with an ice cube. So the idea with the ice cube is, if somebody asks you to hold an ice cube, to start off with, it stings. And if you've ever held one, ice is stingy. It's cold. And the first thing you probably want to do is throw the ice cube down and go, no. But if you actually sit with that, yes, it's uncomfortable, but the ice will melt. You'll have a wet hand, but the ice will melt, the stinging and the uncomfortable sensations go. And that's the idea with this emotion. You're not sitting with the emotion to give it power or control over you. You're learning to sit with it so that it can pass. So you can go, okay, I'm feeling really scared, feeling really anxious, and it's not going to last forever. This is going to be temporary. This is going to be fleeing. And another analogy, if it helps here, is you being the sky and the emotions being the clouds or the weather. They're there. And yeah, they can be really, really annoying when they come in if you're not expecting a rain cloud or a storm, but they do pass. You are the sky. You are permanent. You are there, constant. Okay? Hope that helps a little bit just with working with your emotions. So one of the techniques that I use with my clients when we're dealing with the body, when we're dealing with any emotions, is to give it a grounding, is to give it a safe space. So we can always come back to that when we're sitting with those more uncomfortable emotions and feelings. And so I use an anchor here. And for some people, it's a body anchor, and for other people, it's a memory anchor. What I mean by this is, if I asked you to sit somewhere quietly and to close your eyes and just really feel into your body as to where it feels safe. Where does it feel relaxed and calm in your body? And if you can pinpoint that in your body, great. If you can say, yeah, do you know what? When I feel safe, when I feel secure, I can feel it in my gut or in my stomach, fantastic. And just sit there and feel into that. and just enjoy that safety and security that brings with it. Some people struggle with this because we're so disconnected from our bodies, and if that's you, absolutely fine, I was there too, in which case you can use a memory of a time when you felt really safe and secure. And again, just really feeling into that memory. If this is a memory, try and engage your senses, like what did you see, what did you hear, what did you smell, what did you taste, how were you feeling at the time? And just allow yourself again to sit with that wonderful feeling so that you can know what it is like in your body when your body does feel safe and secure. And really practicing that as much as you can or are able to really can help, because when you are then faced with something that isn't quite as comfortable, that is something that maybe has been a huge trigger for you over the last however many years, it's nice to be able to have that as a grounding, to have that as something you can return to at any point. And so if that sounds like you, hopefully that helps. And if you want more support on what that would look like, so I really do recommend getting some one-on-one support with that, please do let me know, and we can do a one-off session on just anchoring and what yours would look like and how that can really help you. And as I said, the reason that we're doing this is we're building that emotional resilience. Okay, so building a really emotional resilience means having a tolerance of discomfort. So by sitting with the emotions, we learn to tolerate discomfort, okay, without immediately seeking to escape or avoid it. This builds emotional resilience and reduces the fear of experiencing negative emotions. So like I was talking about earlier, the more we actually learn to sit with it, the easier it becomes for these emotions to pass through and for us to return to balance. It can also reduce reactivity. So over time, regularly sitting with emotions can decrease emotional reactivity, making it easier to manage anxiety and stress. So it's a really, really big one there. It can also help us to understand underlying causes. So sitting with emotions allows individuals, or us, to explore and understand the triggers and root causes of their anxiety. This self-awareness is crucial for effective management and resolution of anxiety. Now again, as we spoke before, for us to work with the body and emotions, you don't always have to understand why. In fact, you don't need to understand why, but you will find often that some understanding comes through it. The more you sit with it, you think, oh, okay, this has just popped up for me. I didn't realise this was bothering me. So it does kind of trigger sometimes a deeper understanding. It also, and this is so important, it can prevent avoidance behaviours. So what we often do on a very subconscious basis, if we, again, our body and brain always moving towards pleasure, away from pain, if there has been events or experiences, situation events in our past that has caused us pain in any shape, way or form, our brain is going to log that and go, right, we're going to avoid that whenever that comes up again. And yes, it's a short-term fix, isn't it? It sounds amazing. Yeah, I just don't ever have to do that again. But we live as humans in a life that is rich of different experiences, and actually by avoiding some of these things, we could be doing ourselves a disservice. So breaking the cycle of avoidance behaviours can be so, so powerful. If you are avoiding and suppressing emotions, that can lead to a cycle of avoidance behaviours that then reinforces that anxiety that we're talking about. Sitting with emotions really helps us to break this cycle by facing feelings directly. And once we start to do that, some of those avoidance behaviours that we've kind of taken on can reduce. Developing the ability to sit with emotions fosters adaptive coping strategies rather than relying on avoidance as well. So it really does help us in the long run rather than it being a short-term fix. It helps to regulate our emotions too by sitting with our emotions, obviously. It helps to enhance our emotional regulation skills, making it easier to manage not just anxiety but a range of different emotions. So some of us, I would say most of us, are very aware of the more, shall I say, negative, because I don't like labelling emotions too much because they are just emotions, but what we consider to be negative emotions, we're very much aware of those and how they affect us. We're not so good at noticing the positive emotions, and actually very few of us are really good at sitting with the positive emotions. We tend to self-sabotage when we're feeling good, and that is something we're going to be talking about in day 3, is actually what happens when you do start to feel good and you're not used to feeling good, and then your brain finds ways to bring you back down, because It's not a known pattern. Our brain likes patterns. It likes to know we've been here before. We know to avoid that and to do this. And suddenly we start working differently and thinking differently, behaving differently, and we start to feel good. And our brain goes, whoa, we're not used to feeling like this. I think you should do what you used to do because we know what we're doing then. And so it's all about how to manage that. And it's such an incredibly fascinating journey to take. So helping to sit with our emotions really does improve that regulation, and for us to have that more balanced emotional response to things. It can help reduce long-term stress. And one of the ways that I really want to, so I've talked about anchor and how that's really important in having that safety technique or tool that you can rely on when you're initially starting to sit with emotions. But mindfulness practice is another way that you could do it. This feels more down your street, if you like, or up your street. Down your street, up your street, up your street. That sounds better. So present moment awareness, this is where you sit with emotions when you're staying present and fully experiencing what's going on around you without judgment. And that can really help. This is one of the ways that I think I did this as a byproduct of the work that I was doing when I started working on my own anxiety and my own panic disorder. Is meditation was a great one for me. And it wasn't meditation in the truest form. It was meditation because it just meant that every day for an amount of time I would sit with me. I would sit with what was going on for me, my emotions. And that's why to start off every single meditation I do now, I have a journal that's next to me, and I have about 5 minutes where I just allow all of the thoughts and emotions to come up. And that really helps me at this stage to kind of just give me a deeper understanding of what's going on for me. So there might be some unprocessed thoughts that I haven't really allowed myself to think about. There might be some avoidance behaviours that I wasn't even aware of that I've been avoiding or not taking or making the most of different opportunities, etc. And just those 5 minutes of just allowing loads of thoughts to come up, it's amazing what comes up for you. Some of them are just, nonsense, and you go, oh, thanks very much for bringing that to my attention. I really appreciate it. But some of them are really useful. And so if that comes up and I think, oh, I'm going to make a note of that to kind of come back to when I'm not meditating, I just kind of make a quick note. And then I go into a deeper meditation after. So just doing that simple process can really help. It's not, like I said, it's not a true meditation, but I found it incredibly useful, and it's one that a lot of my clients use as well. So please steal it if that feels something that you would like to use. We've talked about labeling and emotions and how important that is, and understanding that you do not need to understand why, that you can just label them. I'm feeling really anxious right now. It's okay if you don't understand why. I'm feeling really scared, right now. Again, it's okay if you don't know why. Your body is just processing something, and it might be a trigger that you're not even consciously aware of. Journaling. This is a great one if you don't have a therapist or a coach to work things through with. You can write down your experiences with emotions, what comes up for you, etc. And I've got in the PDF, there's some information that you can work through there to journal on yourself as well, to help you journal. And the last thing I really want to talk about is how to express those emotions. So we've talked about sitting with them. We've talked about the importance of labeling them. We talked about the benefits of sitting with emotions. But learning how to express those emotions in a way that supports you is truly the game changer. And again, you don't have to understand the why. And I know this is really frustrating for our sensitive change makers in here, but you don't need to understand the deeper root here. You are feeling and allowing those feelings to come forward. So behaviors where you're actually allowing and processing, expressing these emotions. Sorry, I've just had a text message come through. It's really put me off my game there. So yes, allowing ourselves to express these emotions can really activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system is all about supporting you in rest and digest. It's all about supporting you in regulating your nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system, alternatively, which sounds really nice, is the one where you can experience that fight, flight or freeze. And so it's really useful. It's there for a reason, but we don't want to live there. We don't want to live in the sympathetic nervous system. We want a balance between the two. We want to train or relearn how to flip into the parasympathetic nervous system. How can we truly relax? How can we regulate our nervous system? And part of this comes through actually learning to express our emotions in a way that feels really good for you, that isn't necessarily, well, definitely not violent to others, but in a way that feels good for you and that you can express it. So some of these ways, anger, and again, anger's a big one, and it can be really linked to worries and emotions and fears as well. Screaming into a pillow. My daughter clenches her hands and really holds my hand tight, or really gives me a really, really tight hug. That helps her as well. Fear, pacing, crying, shaking, tapping, humming. These behaviours are ones that I've used, or that I know clients have used, that they found really useful. Crying can be incredibly releasing. A lot of people, again, don't think that crying is allowed. I know when I feel really anxious, crying, as long as it's for a short burst and as long as it's for a reason, can really support me in just allowing myself to get that emotion out. So don't think that crying is a weakness. Allowing yourself to cry, as long as it's those short bursts and there's an understanding and a release through it, can be really useful. If there's not a release through crying, then it's not going to be supportive for you. But if you do feel release after, it can be really great. Shaking, and what I mean by this is those people that are watching me on Facebook Live be able to see this, but those people that are on the podcast and the audio won't. But just physically shaking your hands out, stretching, moving, allowing your body to actually move through that emotion that you're currently feeling can again be really releasing and help you to balance your nervous system and to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and reduce those cortisol levels. Humming. This is one that can activate the vagus nerve. If you have read anything about the vagus nerve, it's one of the longest nerves in the body and has access to a lot of different organs in our body, and has been said to really support you in regulating your nervous system. Humming is one of those things that apparently activates it. I don't call myself an expert in that particular area, but that is just my understanding. But I do know that humming can help. There's lots of meditations with humming in it, and if you physically hum, it's very difficult to think things at the same time. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is difficult. So humming can be really, really supportive. Tapping, EFT, if you are into that or you would like to learn more. I think I've done a podcast episode on EFT. In fact, I know I have, because I've had some people on before. But EFT can be really useful. This is where you're tapping on different parts of your body. Now, I have a simplified version that somebody helped me with that's really useful. And that is, so for me, EFT, when I am anxious, because it still comes up from time to time, and this is really useful. And it was very useful back in when my anxiety was heightened constantly. And that is just having my whole hand tapping on the top of my chest, and that's it. That one really helped. And if you think about it, it makes sense, is to when you were a baby and you were being soothed, your parents, guardian, whoever it was normally tapping your bum. You know, we see a lot of that, and it really does help to settle. And so it's the same idea here. It is a self-soothing thing, but I do find a hand at the chest, just doing that, maybe some humming at the same time, or some moving, like walking around as I'm doing that, really does support in just expressing that. The other one that can often help is dancing. Just literally, if you're into movement generally and you like moving, just like dance flow around the living room, the kitchen, and just allowing yourself to feel and express that emotion. So I hope that makes sense. The most widely accepted way of expressing emotions and actually processing it through the body is breathing. And there is so much research out there on breathing techniques and how it can support you through releasing it in the body. And that is because it directly impacts both the physiological and the psychological aspects of anxiety. So it works with the body and the brain. And I really want to just kind of talk through this one in more detail. Now, I'm going to caveat this by saying when I was at my worst with panic disorder and anxiety, breathing techniques really was not a good place to start for me, because when I used to think about breathing, I used to overthink about breathing, and then am I breathing too much? If I stop breathing, is this normal? And so it used to end up being hyperventilating instead. So if that is you, I would use maybe the anchor that we were talking about before, or tapping into the 5 senses. That is just basically, you know, a couple of things that you can hear, see, touch, smell, etc., just to kind of bring you into the present moment. That can really help. And then maybe using one of the other things that we were talking about before, either the tapping, the humming, the moving, the shaking, etc. But if you are in a place where you're okay with trialing breathing techniques, then this one can be good, because it helps to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So slow and deep breathing activates, as I said, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the right rest and digest response. This helps to counteract the fight or flight triggered by anxiety. Deep breathing can slow down the heart rate, which is often elevated during anxiety. And again, this helps to reduce the overall feeling and that body feeling of anxiety. It can also help to relax tense muscles, which is often a common physical sign of anxiety. If you remember before, when all of your energy is going to extremities to get ready to fight or fly away from something, I keep saying that, flee away from something, it can often have, if that's a prolonged experience, it can often have an effect on your muscles. Improved breathing increases oxygen flow to the brain and other vital organs, helping to restore balance and reduce dizziness, shortness of breath, and other anxiety-related symptoms. So that's how it can support you in your body, and it can also support your mind. So breathing exercises provides a focus point, shifting attention away from the anxious thoughts and reducing that mental clutter. It can help encourage you to stay in the present moment, which helps to prevent rumination. Rumination is huge. Rumination is thinking the same thoughts over and over again, which our brain is amazing at doing. But it helps to counteract that, especially if we're ruminating about past events or future worries, because that can often fuel anxiety. So it's really helping us to give ourselves a focus. It helps to calm emotions. So we were talking about that before. Slow rhythmic breathing can help regulate emotions by providing a sense of control. And then stress reduction, it can help to reduce your overall stress. It can also have an effect on the brain. So again, breathing here can influence brain function by promoting a balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Like I said, we want to have that balance. We don't want to be living in just the sympathetic nervous system, because that's when we're constantly in that survival mode and that anxiety loop. And it really helps us to maintain a calm and alert state, because what often happens if we're in a constant loop of anxiety, we're in a hyper arousal, so we are constantly hyper aware of tiny little things in our environment, which then triggers more anxiety. It becomes a vicious circle. Whereas if we teach our body how to activate the parasympathetic nervous system as well, we learn the difference between rest and calm and true alert, like when we do need to be alert for something, and how we can actually then revert back to rest and calm, rather than always being in a hyper arousal state. I hope that makes sense. It also supports your stress hormones, like cortisol, etc., and it can improve cognitive function because you've got more oxygen going around your brain, etc., in your body, which helps with concentration, decision making, problem solving, etc., which often gets impaired by anxiety because the prefrontal cortex is switched off and gone to lunch, as we were talking about before. So here are some techniques, and you can, as long as, again, just ask for a doctor if you do feel that you need that extra support here. There are different techniques that you can use. So you can use deep breathing. This is one where you inhale deeply through the nose, allowing the diaphragm to expand, so that's your lower stomach, to expand and fill the lungs with air, and then exhale slowly through the mouth, and you repeat for several minutes. This promotes relaxation and reduces tension. So that's one that I use quite a lot. You've also got box breathing. So this is where you inhale for a count of 4, hold the breath for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, hold the breath again for a count of 4, and then repeat. This is supposedly to enhance focus and calms the nervous system. So box breathing is one that I've definitely read a lot about over the years, specifically for anxiety. You've then got 4-7-8 breathing. So this is inhaling through the nose for a count of 4, holding the breath for a count of 7, and then exhaling through the mouth for a count of 8 and repeating that cycle. This helps manage acute anxiety and promotes a deeper relaxation. And then the last one is alternate nostril breathing. So this is where you close the right nostril, inhale it through the left nostril, then close the left nostril and exhale through the right nostril. And you just keep alternating nostrils. This is supposedly helps you to balance your nervous system and reduce stress. So I hope those are supportive for you, and it's another tool or technique that you can try. Again, when you're working with the body and the emotions, I really think it's important here that logically you won't be thinking differently, you'll be being differently, feeling differently. So these things that we've been talking about today are not necessarily going to have an immediate effect on the way that you're thinking. Okay, this is going to have an effect on how you're feeling. So when you're using these, you want to get used to listening to those emotions, listening to your body, so you can start to work out which ones work for you, which ones are better for you. And when you're doing this, don't try to bring in the thoughts too much. We can talk about thoughts tomorrow and the importance of that. But for body and emotions, remember, you don't need to know the why, and it doesn't work with language. And so you really do need to open up that communication with the body. How's that feeling? So when you've done some breathing, sitting after and going, right, how do I feel in my body right now? Do I feel more relaxed? Do I feel less tense? How are my shoulders feeling? How's my jaw feeling? You know, those places that we tense up, do those feel more relaxed? Okay, and just be aware that it's not going to have an immediate effect on your thought patterns or the way that you think at this stage. That does help. Like I said, it's part of the puzzle, but just have an awareness around that, because I think a lot of people, when they do this, they do it and go, well, I didn't feel any better. But what they mean is I didn't think any differently after, and that's different. So you may not think any differently, but you might feel better after using some of those techniques. So see how they go, and again, sit with them after and see which ones are better for you, work for you. We're all individual, we're all independent. I really like, now that I'm in a place where I can, because I don't have the panic disorder anymore, I am in a place where being able to really elongate my out breath is just wonderful. So I like the diaphragm breathing, you know, increasing my diaphragm, holding it for a little bit and then breathing out longer than I breathe in for. That's my personal choice. You will probably have a different one, but that's the one that I like. Okay, so breathing techniques, as we've hopefully covered, are powerful tools for releasing some of that anxiety, and also sitting is part of being able to sit with those emotions and those bodily feelings, and they can have a real immediate impact on your body. To help to activate this parasympathetic nervous system, which is more of your rest and digest, reducing physical symptoms of anxiety, promoting mindfulness, regulating emotions, and influencing brain activity. So it helps to do all of those different things. Incorporating regular breathing exercises into your routine can provide significant relief from anxiety and improve your overall mental health. So I'm hoping that has been useful. I know this has been a long one today. This is a journey, not a race. So take your time, do sit with this and your emotions and your body, and just allow yourself to feel your way through this part. And I'm really emphasizing the feel, because so many of us are just not used to doing that. This isn't about thinking today. This is about feeling. Okay? It's so important to feel safe in your body to permanently release that heightened anxiety that we were talking about before. Because we can do all the thought work in the world, but if we don't feel safe in our own body, that thought work is not going to stick. Okay, so it's why we started with the body and the emotions today. Okay, find out what works for you. And to help you, because I think a lot of people go, well, how do I know if it's working? We've already spoken about you will feel differently. You won't necessarily think differently. But what you're looking for are times when you can feel relaxed, less tension. So understanding where you hold tension in your shoulders, jaw are normally really important ones, back is especially hips. So if you're feeling more relaxed in those areas, you know that what you're doing is working and is beneficial for you. You can regulate when you start to feel anxious. So you might be able to sit with things better so it passes quicker, or you might be able to breathe through something and again it passes, it doesn't stick around for as long as it used to. And this is going to sound a bit weird, but when you get really used to it, almost feels like you have a friend on the journey with you, like you're no longer alone anymore. People often talk about, source or higher self or God or the universe. For me, it's just like, I just feel, I'm not religious, so I just like the idea of having a friend on the journey with me, and that's very much what it feels like when I'm doing this work. It feels like somebody's there giving me a hug going, you're not alone, it's okay, you've got this, it'll pass. So I hope that really helps. I personally, just to give my personal experience in this so you can kind of see, I found they compounded over time. So the more I did them, the more I noticed when I didn't do them. So for example, mine was very much meditation and anchoring to start off with, and I brought in the breathing. The more I did that, the better I felt, the more it had an impact on everything. But if I stopped that for a prolonged time, I felt the difference. And again, noticing, feeling the difference here, not thinking differently. Yes, so I hope that's been really supportive for you. It's been a long one, so thank you for sticking with it. If you have any questions, please do reach out. I know it's been really intense and quite detailed today. We're going to be back tomorrow with day 2 at the same time. And for those people on podcast, it'll be next week. So I release these week at a time, so not to overload you. But you will be listening more about thought processes and thought patterns tomorrow, and rewiring your brain and how to rewire your thoughts, etc. So that's what we're going to be focusing on tomorrow. If you still want to sign up to get the PDFs, because there are kind of little tables and journaling prompts and things for you to go through to help you through these next 3 days, either just reach out and I can send them over to you, or you can sign up through the link and you'll get them there. Okay, I'm sending you so much love, and I will be back tomorrow, and take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you have any takeaways or any questions, please do reach out to me either through Instagram, LinkedIn or Facebook at Kate Carter Coaching, or you can email me at kate@katecarter.co.uk. I always love to hear your feedback and the things that you have taken from the podcast. If you know of any other highly sensitive people, then please do share this so that I can reach more and support more highly sensitive people to embrace their strengths and gifts. As a thank you, I will pick a winner every month for a free 50-minute coaching session with me. Thank you so much.